Japan is known for a lot of niche subcultures. It's the only place in the world where you can see someone dressed up in sleek tech wear with outfits so stylish you'd swear you've been transported to Night City from the game Cyberpunk, standing right next to a ganguro with her tan skin, thick makeup, and enough bright colors to fill a child's coloring book. But not all Japanese subcultures are made equal. Some of them can have very dark and downright depressing origins. And one of these dark subcultures is called Jiraikei. And unlike other subcultures in Japan like Gyaru, where it started out as a way of rebelling against conservative Japanese social beauty standards, Jiraikei has its origins in the infamous red light district in Japan called Kabukicho, as well as in the stigma that surrounds the topic of mental health in the country. The primary stereotype for women in this subculture is that they're cute and girly on the outside, but are obsessive, emotionally unstable, and self-damaging on the inside. And this is also the primary criticism of Jiraikei, because even though a lot of people in the Jiraikei scene are trying to fight against this stigma and use the subculture as a way to raise awareness about mental health in Japan, there is still criticism of this subculture for supposedly glamorizing having mental health issues and self-damaging tendencies. And that's what I wanted to explore in this video. How did Jiraikei get started exactly, and what's with the mental health aspect? And for a subculture that's all about the damages of mental illnesses, what's with the lace ribbons and frills? And the answer to that is a lot more complicated than you think, actually. So it's really important for me to mention that the word jirai in Jiraikei originated as a derogatory term. The word is derived from the phrase jirai onna, meaning landmine woman, which is a term used to stereotype women who, when you first meet them, are outwardly very kind and bubbly, but later on turn out to be mentally unstable and with major personality issues. The closest I can think of are like those memes by people that really want to bang hot women from jails and psych wards for some reason. But it's still important to know that while the term is a bit tongue-in-cheek, it was still a way to diminish women that were genuinely facing problems with mental health. And this imagery does play a huge part in the Jiraikei subculture, because a lot of the fashion revolves around evoking this unstable landmine idea. Like the classic Jiraikei look uses a lot of clothing that is traditionally very feminine. Blouses with tons of lace and ruffles, frilly high-waisted skirts, and chunky platform shoes. But it's contrasted against small details like the jirai line, which is the iconic style of makeup in the Jiraikei scene meant to evoke the image of someone who's been crying, by making the eyes look more baggy and swollen. This is meant to signify that the person is damaged in a way. It's meant to convey that this person is emotionally fragile and vulnerable. Even the clothing that I mentioned just now are stylized differently. Rather than using traditionally feminine colors like bright pastel, Jiraikei fashion uses a color palette that's more darker in tone, such as black, dark red, and dark pink. Point is, Jiraikei is all about this contrast. They look super feminine, but have small signs indicating that they'll absolutely crash out on you if they want to. And unlike the simple desire to be edgy, there is a dark reason behind these aesthetic choices. Because you gotta remember, Jiraikei has parts of its origins in the red light districts like Kabukicho, specifically with a group called the Toyoko Kids. Toyoko Kids are essentially Japanese runaway children. These kids came from broken homes with abusive parents and difficult home lives, with no emotional safety. So a lot of them end up running away to the big cities like Tokyo or Osaka. And in these big cities, with no financial security or qualifications, a lot of them end up working in the nightlife industry in places like Kabukicho. Places like host clubs and cabaret bars took advantage of these runaway children. And some of these kids took part in the practice of enjo kosai, which is basically underage sugar daddying. And while they're not the creators of the Jiraikei subculture, there was overlap between them and Jiraikei, since a lot of these Toyoko kids were also wearing dark pastel colored outfits with heavy eyeliners and frilly chokers. So it wasn't long before Japanese society lumped these two groups together. It reinforced the idea that if you see a girl in Jiraikei, she might be an emotionally messed up runaway, obsessed with going to host clubs and validation from random men. And while a lot of work is being done to fight this stigma, or at the very least separate the aesthetic of Jiraikei and its dark history, there are still criticisms of the subculture about the glamorization of being emotionally compromised. Because the line separating empowerment and exploitation is sometimes razor thin. So it's no big surprise that Japan isn't really the best place when it comes to mental health awareness. Not saying that other countries are, but when death by overwork becomes a codified term in your society, it does beg the question sometimes. But this reluctance to acknowledge mental health issues have motivated some people in Japan to find ways to make taboo subjects more visible. Just like Jiraikei, there are other subcultures that are all about mental health awareness. Subcultures like Yami Kawaii or Menhera aren't just about the shock value of openly wearing your mental struggles, but also about the self-expression that comes from that. And in a country where you're encouraged to keep the doors to your emotions shut, you do get a reputation when you are open about taboo subjects such as these. For example, in a newsletter by the Faculty of Foreign Studies in Nagoya University, they ran a survey asking students if they would approach a person dressed up in Jiraikei fashion, to which 67% of respondents said that they would not, citing reasons such as, quote, "I associate Jiraikei with people who are a little sick," or menhera. Which, side tangent, menhera is a real slang term in Japan used to describe someone who is facing mental health issues. But menhera also has its own fashion subculture that's also about advocating for mental health awareness. Honestly, there is a lot of overlap between menhera and Jiraikei since they're kind of considered sister subcultures in a way. So yeah, that's just some added context I couldn't fit into the script. Anyway, back to the video. This makes me nervous to talk to them. Their personalities seem cold or distant. As well as, quote, "I imagine Jiraikei people as being surrounded by a dark atmosphere. They seem scary when I talk to them." And while a large part of this reputation is definitely due to misunderstanding the subculture and the intentions behind the people in it, some of it also comes from the criticism that the subculture has faced, namely the fetishization of having mental health issues, as well as the glorification of things like drug use and nighttime work. For example, since the subculture is rooted in taboo subjects like mental illness and self-injury, there are those that criticize Jiraikei for making these things look quirky and cute due to how Jiraikei fashion inherently looks, which in turn ignores the unpleasant parts of living with chronic mental health issues. And while plenty of people in the subculture are okay with you interacting with just the fashion aspect of it, there is a constant back and forth between the struggle of letting people do what they want and the inherent problem of romanticizing a lifestyle that is very difficult, and for some, very painful. It also has to be mentioned that fetishizing anything in general has its own set of problems due to the stereotypes that come when people see you as weak or incapable or in a specific way. It is a slippery slope at the end of the day when you are talking about mental health, and I feel the last thing anyone would want is for others to have a preconceived notion on who you are. Yokogaomag actually said it the best in their article about Jiraikei with, quote, "Although it is self-evident that not everyone adhering to the style struggles with severe mental health issues, this prejudice impacts all enthusiasts with equal force. To this day, it shows no restraint and is rigidly applied to all individuals who identify with this fashion style." There's also the criticism that Jiraikei indirectly encourages hyper-consumerism due to the fashion being very specific in style, with some elitists in the subculture looking down on you if you don't get specific name brand items that you can only find in Japan, which makes things 10 times more expensive if you live anywhere other than Japan. But honestly, as someone who lives in Malaysia and is into the plastic crack that is 40k, I shouldn't be the one to moralize about something being too expensive to consume. My little plastic men demand a lot from me, and one of those things is my wallet. And that's the fragile balance that Jiraikei currently sits between. For some, it's a way to express what it's like to live with illnesses that don't necessarily have cures. For others, it's a stereotype to be avoided. But even with all this stigma, Jiraikei is more popular than ever. And the crazy thing is, even before watching this video, you've probably seen Jiraikei before without even knowing it. So the crazy thing about researching for this video was finding just how much media there was involving Jiraikei that I didn't know existed. Like, I'm not just talking about anime, manga, and light novel adaptations, but also straight up appearing in video games. Like, yeah, you have your gimmicky visual novels where the entire shtick is that you can romantically pursue a Jiraikei girl, but then you get to popular titles like Needy Streamer Overload, which deals with the real nitty-gritty of the Jiraikei scene. The game is all about managing the main character Ame's online career as she wants to become a top-tier streamer. So you gotta help her with things like replying to fan messages, researching topics for future streams, and according to the game's very own Steam page, squeezing stupid amounts of super chats out of her donation-happy otaku followers, which is totally not reflective of the modern-day streaming landscape. And the thing is, the game also nails the portrayal of Jiraike not just fashion-wise, with Ame being dressed up in that iconic Jiraike style, but also in personality. Here's how the game's Steam page describes Ame. Quote, "While she may look somewhat low-key and quiet, she's actually a ridiculously selfish and vapid girl with a tendency to get carried away and a desperate need for approval. She's, well, kind of a troublesome personality." And you do actually have to help Ame with her troublesome personality. Part of the game is also about helping Ame regulate her mental state off-stream by deciding on things like what kind of vices to give her to help her relax, how intimate or cordial you want your relationship with Ame to be, and manage how she interacts with toxic fan messages. And depending on how far or how lax your choices have been, it can result in very dark endings for Ame. And while I've yet to play the game, from reviews that I found both on Steam and Reddit, a lot of people do praise the game for its tasteful portrayal of living with mental illnesses and chronic addiction, and showing that these kinds of people probably shouldn't be given unregulated internet access. And that's actually a huge running theme in a lot of media that portrays Jiraike. The idea that getting better isn't really that easy when you're in a self-perpetuating cycle. That, yeah, we are responsible for our own actions, but the environments that we're in absolutely play a part in encouraging the best and worst parts of us. And another place you can see this is in the manga series called Tomorrow I'll Be Someone's Girlfriend. It's an anthology manga series that focuses on the more realistic side of industries like host clubs and rental girlfriends, where other certain anime and manga might show rental girlfriends as this lighthearted and almost inspiring tale. Here it shows that most often than not, the people in it do it out of desperation more than anything else, with imbalance being inherent in a lot of these industries. And one of the characters, Yua, does go through this. She's a runaway kid that goes to Shinjuku with no plan whatsoever when she gets there. And throughout her parts of the story, you basically see her spiral as she slowly gets taken advantage of by the seedy people and places in and around Shinjuku, ultimately falling prey to the superficial attention that places like host clubs provide. And throughout the story as well, you do see her repping that standard Jiraike look, which ties back to the idea in the subculture of that unstable landmine personality. And while Yua and Ame are fictional characters, the stories that they're meant to embody are ones that happen all the time in places like Kabukicho. Emotionally compromised people being dragged further down by the circumstances of their environment, desperately seeking a place to belong. But what's important to remember is that Jiraike isn't just a tragic trope or a label for unstable girls. The subculture is and has always been about taking ownership of the things that can hurt you. Maybe it was something traumatic, maybe it's something that you still live with, maybe it's something that you can't help but have. The subculture is all about living with what hurts you and moving forward despite that. And yeah, it gets criticized, but honestly, what subculture doesn't? You have so many examples of previous subculture movements being misunderstood for the longest of times before they were accepted. But for the people who find meaning in Jiraike, it's a reminder that being damaged doesn't mean you can't be seen. That at the end of the day, with however long it takes, you will find a way past your pain, and in doing so, take ownership of it.